My name is Dorota. You are attending a lunch and learn for data protection. The name is Cover Your Assets. Yes, we are trying to be smart. And we've already covered the whole skip the dishes card. Again, if anybody has had a hard time using your card or didn't receive the card, just let us know right away. Again, you are on mute. Any comments, questions have to go into the chat or Q&A box, and we will, of course, respond to you right away. The majority of you attending know who Shing Digital is, but for those who are new to us, we are an IT services organization based out of Alberta. We have a Calgary and an Edmonton office. However, we work all across not just Alberta, but Canada, and also we support locations in other countries as well. And the topic of our discussion today is cover your assets. What we mean, of course, are your digital assets. So if you were expecting something else, sorry, which of course is all your IT systems that run your business. We will be putting context around what your assets are worth and how you will be able to protect those. Most people we have found undervalue their data. This is important because new threats are emerging all the time, and we have been actually posting on social media quite a bit of information around the new threats that are popping up, especially during COVID. They're happening for small businesses, medium and large. So the question is, what is the value of getting up and running in case of a disaster, big or small? Or maybe you're okay with your status quo. We need systems that are reliable and quick to get us up and running as quickly as possible. So the question isn't, will a disaster happen? The question is, how quickly will you be able to get up and running? For those of you who are, well, as old as me or older, you know that data protection has moved from swapping tapes to new systems, which we will be covering some of today. At the end of the day, we all want peace of mind that we are doing our due diligence. Again, if you're okay with status quo, fantastic. If not, what are some areas that we need to be looking at? So for the next 40 minutes, Kash Wong, who is the president and the chief propeller head of our company, I have asked him to wear his propeller hat. He will not do it, just so you guys know, but he has the hat. For the next 40 minutes, he will be talking about some definitions of data protection. What do we mean by your assets? IT systems and the value to the business, the value of your data. And then we'll talk about Dell IDPA and cybersecurity vaults as some of the systems that are available for your information. All of the questions that are going to be popping up, we're going to be answering them in the last 15 minutes of the hour, so that you have some time to eat, listen, and then we'll deal with the questions at the end. If we don't get to all of the questions, we will be emailing the answers to everybody for those questions that we didn't get to. And the other thing that I wanted to let you know is that we are recording this session for our own benefit and also for those individuals who were not able to attend, because there are always a few. So we will be sending that recording to those individuals. So without further ado, I'm going to pass this on to Kash Wong. Take it away.
Perfect. Thanks, Dorota. I'm just going to start sharing my screen here and my presentation. So, all right, perfect. So again, thank you everybody for coming to our virtual lunch and learn today. This is our first crack at doing something like this virtually. So we've learned some hard lessons that skip the dishes doesn't really want your money, even though they do want your money. But anyhow, it's been quite an experience setting this up, and so I think as we go forward, we're going to be doing more of this because I think the world is kind of at the new normal, and we won't get back to whatever our normal was for a little while here. So thank you everybody for coming. Again, today's topic is cover your assets, and for those that don't know me, I'm Kash, and president of Shing Digital, and like Dorota says, chief propeller head. And my contact information is up there on the screen. So if anybody wants to get a hold of me, by all means, I'm I'm generally fairly available. And then if I'm not, I'll certainly get back to any voicemails or emails that you guys might leave me. So today we're talking about digital assets, and by digital assets, what we mean is your data and your IT systems, and and as well through this presentation, I'm going to be using quite a few acronyms. So I want to go through and I want to cover off some of those first. And I realized that as I go through some of my acronyms, I forgot to actually put the acronym. So I'll address that as I talk about them. So the first acronym is going to be disaster recovery. And disaster recovery is just about how your IT folks or you guys recover from if there's any type of disaster, whether it be your building has burned down, flooded, and you need to completely rebuild your system. So disaster recovery encompasses everything from how you back up and protect your data to how you bring it all back up and running again. And the next is business continuity. And probably people talk about business continuity, but they really don't have sort of the words for it. And that's what we call it, business continuity, or BC. So a lot of times when we talk about disaster recovery or DR, in the same breath, we also talk about BC or business continuity. So these days, it's no longer just about how do you recover from it, but how do you continue working in the event that there is this disaster that is happening to you guys, at this very moment. And then we're going to talk a little bit about recovery point objective, or the acronym for it is RPO. And recovery point objective is really about at one point in time do you want to be able to recover data from. As an example, if you're doing daily backups at midnight every day, well, then your recovery point objective is to be able to recover from some time in that time window of when the backup happens. And the biggest thing to understand about RPOs is that the more or the shorter recovery time objective that you want. So instead of being able to recover from midnight of last night, I want to be able to recover from an hour an hour ago, or maybe even 5 minutes ago. The shorter that window, the higher the cost of any solution to protect your data. And the last acronym I'm going to throw at you on this slide is Recovery Time Objective, or RTO. And the recovery time objective is, after a disaster has happened, how long does it take IT to recover from that disaster? Is it 2 weeks? Is it 1 day? Is it 4 hours? Or do we want absolute zero downtime and have the ability to recover immediately? And again, just like RPO, the thing to understand here is that the shorter that time window, unlike the recovery point objective where it just gets more expensive, well, a shorter RTO actually gets exponentially more expensive the shorter you want that window to be. So some things to keep in mind, because sometimes we always want things to be able to we want to be able to recover right away, and we want to get back up and running right away. But everything comes at a cost, and the shorter that window, the more it's going to cost. Now, as we go through our slides, I'm sure you guys are going to catch me using more acronyms, and I'll certainly try to expand on those. Or if anybody has any questions, by all means, fire me an email afterwards, and I can tell you what some of those acronyms are. The first thing I'm gonna talk about is IT systems. And by IT systems, what I'm referring to your servers, your storage systems, and your applications. And by applications, I'm talking about your point of sale systems, your accounting systems, your CRM systems, your ERP, or simply just your email systems. And I've used, I think, 3 acronyms right there. So you'll probably catch me using more. Now, any of these assets that I mentioned can reside in your server room. They can reside in a server closet. They can be in a data center at your location, right? Or it could be a data center in someone else's location, or it can even reside on the cloud. Now, I'm not going to focus too much on the cloud today because that subject can be very expansive, and there are different strategies to deal with the cloud. Just keep in mind that anything that you have in the cloud, that you want to make sure you check with your cloud providers to see whether or not they're doing any backups for you, because a lot of the cloud providers will do cloud backups for their benefit, but not for yours. And what I mean by that is that they back up their system so that they can recover from a disaster. But if you have some sort of disaster with just your data, their backup systems are not there to help you out and to recover your data. So make sure you ask those questions whenever you do any type of transition to any kind of cloud systems. Now, as with all the rest of the physical assets that you have, IT systems, whether they be servers or whether they be applications, have some sort of value. And so that's the next part that we're going to be talking about is how we value IT systems. Now, there's there's primarily two different ways to value IT systems, and a lot of SMBs tend to look at IT systems from purely their book value, which is how much did it cost to buy that server, or how much am I paying for that application and the support of those systems. And what happens is by looking at it in this kind of view, it can lead to a lot of underinvestment in to protect those type of assets that you have, because just because you have a server that might be worth just a few $1,000s, the data and the value that it brings to your business can be substantially higher than that. So the second way to value your IT systems is more from a business value perspective. What do those systems and what kind of impacts do they have on your business? Now, calculating the business value of IT systems is not an easy task, and it is very different from business to business and the type of business that you're in. And without getting too much into the weeds about how you can go through the details of valuing your systems, I'm going to go through some questions that you might want to ask yourself about your IT systems and to give yourself a broader view of what all these systems mean to your business. And some of these questions to ask yourself is, with the systems you have today, if you didn't have them, would you be able to do the same volume of business today? Right. And we're always trying to do more with less, and the way that we do that generally is with our IT systems. Which brings us to our next point, is that without those systems, are you going to need more people to perform those tasks than are currently done by your systems, whether it be your servers or whether it be your applications. And the most important question to ask is, can you compete at the same business level as your competitors without these IT systems? Now, I'm sure everybody has different answers to each of those questions, and that's fine. Every business is different. But what I hope it illustrates for you as you go through this exercise of asking the questions is to think about the impact that all of these systems have on your business. Because even if you're not a technical person, understanding the business value of your IT systems will help you to make decisions about the technology that you have today, and perhaps the technology that you'll have in the future. Now, we talked about business value being a little bit harder to calculate from business to business. I'm going to sort of pivot off to some of the things that you can calculate. And for those that are inclined, I would say pull out a calculator, and you can sort of work through this process with me, and to sort of figure out what some of those costs are going to be for you. Now, some of the calculations I'm going to be going through are going to be quite simple. So this isn't an exhaustive exercise. So, but certainly work through those with me, and hopefully at the end you'll have some of your own numbers, and I would love to see in some of the chats about what some of those numbers are. So it'll be great if some of you can run through those with me. All right. So first number I'm going to use is the average weekly earnings in Alberta. Now these are 2019 numbers because the 2020 numbers are not exactly the norm. So for our average weekly earnings in Alberta for 2019 works out to be about 1,149 per week. And so your average employee Alberta in Alberta makes roughly just under 60,000 a year, and we're going to use 60,000 just for easier math, hopefully. And then from that yearly earning, what we want to calculate is, what is the fully loaded cost of an employee? So by fully loaded cost, I'm talking about, payroll taxes, benefits, the cost to have an office for them, phones, you name it. And I'm using a factor about 1.4, which is sort of in the middle of what that number should be. And again, it's different for every company. But 1.4 I find is generally a safe number to use. And so if we take our yearly earnings and we multiply by our fully loaded cost factor, we get a number of about 84,000 a year, which is what that employee costs a business. And a full-time employee does roughly 2,080 hours a year. And if you guys can pull up some of your calculators and working out that math, that works out to be roughly about $40.38 per employee. And so now what we're going to do is we're going to sort of use a fictional company. And again, by all means, sort of use some of your own numbers. But let's say we use a fictional company that has 20 employees. And so if we take those 20 employees, we multiply by that fully loaded cost per working hour, it works out to just over $800 per hour is what those employees cost during working hours. Now the next part, again, we're going to be using our same fictional company, and our fictional company does $10 million a year. Now, again, this calculation works best on companies that are more transactional, being things like retail or just things that have constant volume. So this is just to sort of illustrate the point. But let's just say our company does 10 million a year, and then we'll use the amount of hours worked per year to divide that revenue up. And so roughly, we generate roughly about $4,800 in revenue for every working hour. And so this is sort of start working out what our cost for if we have downtime during these working hours as well. So if we take that number, and we add it to our cost of our 20 employees, and roughly for every hour of downtime, our business cost is about $5,600 per hour of lost revenue and lost productivity. Now, this number doesn't take into account the cost for IT recovery. It also doesn't take into account the cost to your reputation for when you're down. And it also doesn't account for future lost business, because if somebody wanted to transact with your business while you're being down, and they can't do it at that moment, these days it's very easy to virtually go across the street or to your next competitor and buy the goods or services from them. So there's a lot more things that will come into this number rather than just your hard business costs. But your hard business costs will give you at least a general ballpark idea of how much any downtime is costing you. Now, just for some reference, Gartner actually did a study of, now this is an enterprise number, so certainly take this with a grain of salt, but the median amount that it costs an enterprise in the US for 1 hour of downtime is about $300,000 USD, right? Which works out to be almost $5,000 per minute that enterprises in the US are losing when they have some downtime. So hopefully that number kind of puts some things into perspective, and that exercise has helped you to figure out how much downtime actually costs you. Now, the next piece that we're going to be covering is data, because we have our IT systems, which is essentially all of the infrastructure and the applications on how we store and how we collect and manage data. But we generally separate out data as a separate asset because it's valued differently than your systems. And we want to kind of figure out and know what our data is worth to our company. And there's actually an entire field of study that is dedicated to this, and it's called infonomics, or the economics of information. And if you take a look at a lot of the new internet companies, I shouldn't say new, but internet companies such as Facebook, such as Google, such as Twitter, information is their business. Information drives their entire business model. Even all the way down to Google's self-driving cars and the maps that they give away for free. Everything is driven by data, right? The rest of their business has a book value and has some business value, but the most important part of their business is all of the data that they collect, whether you like it or not, or whether you know it or not. The one thing I am going to kind of tell you where there is a hard number to some of this information is what we call personal identifiable information, or PII. And I can't tell you how much that data is worth, but I can tell you what the cost of that data is if you lose it in some sort of breach to ransomware, or to hackers, or to somebody in a bad internal actor that might be stealing this data. If you lose any PII, the Canadian Office of the Privacy Commissioner can fine you up to $100,000 per record that you lose if you do not report it in a timely manner to that office. So certainly there are some hard costs when it comes to penalties for some of this data. And again, I usually cover some of this in my cybersecurity talk, so I'm not going to dive too much into this today. But again, anybody that wants to have those discussions afterwards, by all means, reach out to us. So what else do we consider as data, right? Well, we've talked about IT systems being servers, being applications, but what do we consider as data, right? And sometimes a lot of people don't think about it, but your email is a treasure trove of data. That's where we do a lot of our communications internally. That's where we do a lot of our communications with our vendors. That's where we do a lot of communications with the partner companies that we work with. And if anybody has lost email for any period of time, you know how much important information is actually stored within people's emails. So I'm not talking so much about the email systems, but everything that's stored within, right? And of course, things like quotes and proposals, right? These days, it's about being able to go back, take a look at what we've sold, whether it be for warranty purposes, whether it be for pricing things in the future for the same customers. This is very important information, and I mean, I think we have data probably going back about 8 years in terms of our current system on our quotes and proposals, to give us that ability to go back and see what we have sold and what we sold it for. And of course, your contact list, right? Those contact lists are extremely important. They allow us to communicate with customers. They allow us to market to them. And so there's certainly a value to all of that data, right? And of course, intellectual property. Sometimes even if you don't develop software, or you're not an engineering firm, intellectual property sometimes is even some proprietary policies or processes that you guys run internally to make yourselves more streamlined. And of course, a lot of times we have that information on a policy document, right? And all of that is considered intellectual property and as part of the data. And quite frankly, any data that you store, anything on paper or electronically that you use in the course of your doing your business is considered part of your data asset. And so how do we value all of this data? Well, um, Gartner has an entire methodology for going through and coming up with a number on how you value your data, and it's quite in depth, and it's again quite expansive, and you certainly need almost an accounting firm or Gartner to go through that with you. But some of the things that I've picked out of their methodology is just some questions for you to ask yourself about, or to help you to value your data, right? And the first question to ask is, how much would it cost to replace that data? Again, we'll go back to the example of the emails. If you lost a couple of years worth of emails as an example, right? It's not just about that time period, right? It's about all of the information that was lost in there, because our emails tend to be almost like a second memory to us. That's how we look back to our conversations, right? And how do you put a dollar value on all of that information that gets lost, right? And then is it even possible to replace that information? And the second question to ask yourself is, how much does this data contribute to the revenue of our company? And some SMBs don't really think about the data that they collect, and they think a lot about the actual transaction itself, right? Who buys what and how much that they buy. But if you take that data and how that data is being used today is really helping a lot of companies to accelerate their sales. Because if you analyze that data, you can start figuring out trends such as, I get more people in on Monday afternoons as an example. And, when they come in, generally they buy this, or they buy certain things on certain shelves. And so that can really help you to plan out the strategies, your sales strategies for your store, to make sure that you direct people to areas where they might buy some additional things as well. And I mean, stores have been doing this for years. If you've ever been to Superstore or Canadian Tire, all of that product that they have right next to the cashier, right? It's to get those things in front of you, so that when you want that sort of instant hit that you want to buy something, it's right in front of you. Now imagine using your data and knowing that there's more people that come into the store on Monday afternoons, and they're buying a particular product from a particular shelf. Well, now you can start stocking things around those products, right? So that you can attract people to buy more, thereby accelerating your business. And the last one, and it's probably the biggest one, is how much could you make by renting or selling your data? And now I'm going to put this into a slightly different context, in that it's not necessarily about renting or selling your data, but sometimes it's about when companies are either being bought, sold, or merged. These days, they're still being evaluated by their book value, so all of their hard assets. But these days, a lot of companies are now being valued based on the data that you have. And even if you're not using it to that extent today, the other company might want that data in order to accelerate the business merger or the acquisition, right? And to accelerate sales more. And that's how they're determining the value of the business. And a lot of times the data that you have can be worth substantially more than the book value of your business. So data itself is considered almost a gold mine, right? It's a tangible yet intangible asset that can be worth more than all of your physical assets. And especially a company like ours, where we're an IT company and we're a knowledge-based company, I can certainly tell you that our business is valued a lot more based on our data. rather than our physical assets, because we don't have nearly as many physical assets. So now that we've determined that you have a gold mine on your hands, right? What are some of the threats to that gold mine? And the first and the most obvious is natural disasters, right? It could be fires, it could be floods, or it could be things like there's a structural failure in your building, right? Or the HVAC in your server room has failed, and all of your servers have melted, right? Those are generally the easy ones to quantify. And those are usually the things that we think about first when we think about protecting all of our IT systems and their data. The second threat is a little bit more subtle, right? And a lot of times it comes down to things like accidental data deletion, or more commonly, people accidentally drag and move data and forget where they moved it to, and so we have to go in and do a restore. But then there's also malicious data deletion, right? You might have an employee that is disgruntled, and so they go and they start deleting data that you maybe don't run across on a regular basis, and you won't know it until you need it. And the third part of that threat is data corruption, right? Which not quite as common, but certainly happens. And it could be because of failures in the system. It could be systems being overloaded. There's a lot of reasons why data might get corrupted. And so for the first two threats, a good backup strategy with some sort of offsite solution and regular testing of those backups are generally at least sufficient or meet a minimum level for you to protect against these threats to your gold mine, right? The third threat, on the other hand, is cybersecurity. And it is not only the biggest threat, but also the one that evolves the most. Just like the first two threats, a properly architected backup solution used to be generally good enough to protect against all of these bad guys and their malware. But certainly that has all changed. Malware or ransomware has gotten much smarter, and they can lurk in your network for literally months undetected. And they know all of the common backup techniques and all the common backup technologies that you use, right? And a lot of the more sophisticated ransomware will even build a plan of attack autonomously without any intervention, so that way they can have the most impact on your systems. As an example, Dorota was talking about how we used to use tapes. Well, we moved on from tapes to USB drives, to then we moved to NASs, and so that predominantly on the SMB market, that's what a lot of clients have out there today, is that they use a NAS as a backup target for their backup software. Well, the ransomware and the hackers have an attack for that. They know that that's what you do. So they purposely attack your backup targets so that you can't recover from any of that information. Well, then you go, well, I don't use NASs. I do maybe a server to server replication of my backups. And by extension, I replicate some of this stuff to a cloud provider. Well, they have an attack for that too. They'll do a long-term pervasive attack to make sure that any of your backups that you replicate to another server or to the cloud are not going to be usable at all when you need to use it. So they've thought about those kind of things. Well, then you say to yourself, well, I get alerts when my backups fail, so I'll know when these things are happening. Well, they've got attacks for that as well. So a lot of the hackers in ransomware will modify backup jobs. So to you as a system administrator, they look like they're still working fine on a day-to-day basis. But in actuality, nothing is getting backed up and you're not getting any alerts. And unfortunately, a lot of the systems out there, they manage by exception versus by rule. And what this means is that if they're not getting an alert that a backup is failing, a lot of times they don't go and take a look at it. And so by the time you detect the malware and realize that your backups are not working, it's already too late. Your systems are encrypted, your data is stolen, and you can't recover any of that data from your backups. And so from real world experiences, we've certainly seen this with customers that haven't necessarily put in all the right pieces to protect all of their data. So that's it for the first part of that presentation. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to flip over to the Dell EMC side of my presentation. And I think I'm running a bit long here in time, so I'm going to try not to rush through these ones too much. So for Dell Data Protection, Dell Data Protection Solutions, we're going to be talking about a appliance that Dell has to help protect your gold mine and keep everything safe, and to also address a lot of the challenges that we brought up in the first part of my presentation. And so the appliance that we're going to be, or the solution that we're going to be focusing on today, is what's called Dell's Integrated Data Appliance, or DP4400. Sometimes we use those words interchangeably, right? And I'll take a little bit of time to talk about the data domain as well, which is a part of the IDPA, right? And about the impacts on some of the challenges that I've talked about so far. On this part of the slides, the first thing I'm going to talk about is the business challenges to a lot of businesses today, and some may consider it good, while others may not. But the challenge to businesses today is that business is no longer 8 by 5. It's more like 6 a.m. to midnight, or 24 by 7. We're constantly connected to our devices. We're always on, and we have moved to applications that are always on. And if we haven't yet, this pandemic has certainly pushed us in that direction. That business email notification that pops up on your phone in the evening, I guarantee you a lot of the folks that are on this call today feel almost compelled to answer it. And when they do, and they need to action on something, you're gonna hop onto your business application to get it taken care of. And that drives the expectation of the clients as well. A lot of clients these days expect you to be available and expect to be able to digitally transact with you, right? And of course, they expect that all of this information and all this data that you're using to transact with them is kept safe. Now, to summarize all of that, in the IT world, they call this digital or IT transformation, right? Which is using more systems, using more data, using more online applications in order to interact either business to business or business to consumer. What this has done is that it has really driven, massive amounts of data growth worldwide, and certainly I suspect in a lot of your businesses as well. So just to give you an idea, IDC says that by 2025, the amount of data created worldwide is going to be 163 zettabytes. Right now, I'm sure you're certainly not going to have that much, but a lot of you are going to be on the same trajectory in terms of the amount of data that you have today. The same IDC study also shows that a lot of SMBs are growing their data by anywhere from 16 to 20% a year. So by 2025, like I said, even though you won't be at 163 zettabytes, you're going to have significantly more data that you're looking after today or tomorrow than you will today. And that always becomes challenging to manage. So what are some of those challenges that we face in terms of protecting all of that data, right? We've already identified that you're accumulating a lot more data, and that data can be spread across servers, data centers, and into the cloud, right? And of course, especially in Alberta over the last few years, IT is asked to deliver more for less, or at least at the same level. And those are certainly challenging, right? And the requirements to meet some of those challenges are to shrink our RPO and RTO windows, right? Lower the cost to protect our data growth, right? And also to utilize things such as the cloud, to keep some of those costs low, and of course, some sort of high performance system so that we can shrink that RPO and RTO time. And so how we accomplish a lot of that for our clients is with the Dell IDPA. And so it comes in and solves a lot of the challenges that we have in terms of managing the data growth, while also increasing the expectations of being able to lower all of those RPO and RTO times. Now, the IDPA in our opinion, a perfect marriage of Dell's hardware and software in order to protect your data, aka your gold mine. And the IDPA, or the DP 4400, comes in two flavors. One starts at 8 terabytes and can grow to 24 terabytes, while the other one starts at 24 terabytes and can grow to 96 terabytes. The appliance is either preloaded with 24 terabytes of storage, or 96 terabytes of storage, depending on which one you buy. And if you start off with just the 8 terabytes of backup storage, in order to unlock more storage, you just need to purchase another license key. So Dell will bundle in all the storage for you already. And as you need more, you can just unlock it as you go. So there's none of that massive upfront cost to unlock all of that data in the beginning. And so what this means is that you no longer have to forklift an entire storage system when you need more backup storage, or these days with the supply chain, wait weeks if not months before a new storage system arrives. And the other advantage of the IDPA is that, instead of having to figure out all of your complex licensing that you did before with previous backup systems, where you had to think about, okay, I've got Oracle to protect here, I've got Microsoft SQL to protect there, I've got 20 servers, I've got this, and then trying to figure out all those licensing costs. That same license key that unlocks the storage, or the base key that comes with it, gives you unlimited applications and servers to back up. You're just limited by the amount of backup storage that you pay for with that license key. So all of that complex machinations and calculations that we had to do with figuring out our licensing costs go out the window, and is simplified. So one of the reasons why Dell called it the integrated data appliance is that, not only does it come with all of the hardware that you need, but it also comes with the best of breed software and components that Dell EMC data protection is known for. The IDPA includes a piece of software called Avamar, and Avamar is their enterprise level backup software that is simple to use. It natively integrates with VMware, if that's what you're using, and can back up every major operating system, files, or databases that you may have. It's then married with the Data Domain Virtual Edition, which is the leading backup target on the market today. And it has absolutely the best data deduplication engine out there and available. And according to Dell's numbers, the deduplication engine can give you a dedupe ratio of 55 to 1. In real life scenarios, what we've seen is about 33 to 1 to a high of 105 to 1. It all depends on the type of data that you have and how you do your backups. What this means for you is that there's no wasted space in any of the backup storage of backing up the same data. So if you run multiple backups, if you keep full backups for 7 years as a requirement, right? The amount of data that's actually on the storage is reduced to the absolute minimum, right? And I can't stress enough how big of a deal that engine is, and how much money it has saved our clients, and it can save you, right? And then if you need more backup space, the data domain also comes with another feature called Cloud Tier, and Cloud Tier allows you to then move backups for long-term retention up to the cloud, and you can utilize either AWS or Azure as for long-term backup storage. Thereby reducing the cost of the IDPA without having to go out and get additional license keys. So you can push a lot of that long term to the cloud. And as long as it's configured properly, and that's a big asterisk that I usually put onto almost everything, the data domain can be highly resistant to ransomware attacks. It uses its own proprietary protocols in which to ingest data, and it helps the appliance to fight off some of the general ransomware and hacker attacks. But that big asterisk, don't get me wrong, nothing is perfect. And if the data domain is not configured properly, it can certainly succumb to sophisticated attacks. Now, out of the box, it is configured to be highly resistant. So that's the other aspect of this as well, is that once everything has been set up for you, either by us or by Dell, we'll make sure that the best practices have been put onto all of these components. And although I don't have too much time to cover today, the data domain also has another feature called a data domain cyber recovery vault, which makes it next to impossible to hack any of the data that's been put into that vault. And so if anybody wants a deeper dive into cybersecurity vault, absolutely let us know, and we'll arrange a time to go through that with you. And then in terms of the RPO and the RTO for the data domain, I'm going to talk about that a little bit more on an upcoming slide. So I'm just going to skip that for now. And then, of course, the other piece is the data domain allows us to back up to the cloud, but how do we use the cloud as a disaster recovery site, right? And that's where the Cloud DR portion of the IDPA comes in. Cloud DR allows us to either use Amazon or Azure as our DR site. It will replicate the latest backups to the cloud, and it will use low-cost either S3 or blob storage to store the backups. And with 3 clicks, Cloud DR can orchestrate the transformation of the backups, to transformation of backup data to running virtual servers in the cloud. And in a disaster scenario, the cloud can become your primary site, again, ensuring that you have business continuity. A more likely scenario is that you'll probably need to test your DR and your BC strategy every 6 months, and this takes all the manual work of doing that test. But if you did have to run everything off on the cloud until you were able to bring things back, it's simply a 2-click process to bring all of that data back from either Amazon or Azure back to your data centers. So now, again, there's lots of caveats around that, in that everything needs to be set up properly in order for those scenarios to happen. But again, that's where some of our professional services can come in and really help you guys to make sure that that's all set up. So in the event of a disaster, it's 3 clicks to get there. And then when everything is back to normal, it's 2 clicks to get back. Now, if those 3 parts weren't enough to convince you about how good the IDPA is, the IDPA also includes a universal search engine. And what this means that any of the backups that you've done, whether they stay on-premise or go into the cloud, can be universally searched from one interface. If there's a file you needed from 7 years ago and that backup resides in the cloud, you can find it using this search engine. And with just a few clicks, you can bring any of that data back from no matter where it is. And no matter how you do your backups, whether you're backing up an entire virtual machine or you're backing up files, it doesn't matter. You can do a granular restore of a single file if you needed to from any of your backups stored anywhere. And the IDPA also includes something called the Data Protection Advisor, which is the central logging and reporting service that gives you a full 360-degree view of all of the components on the IDPA. And this component probably gets us IT guys a little bit more excited than the general business user, because it gives us a lot of data that we would typically have to go to many different systems to get. And lastly, the Data Protection Central, which acts as a kind of your portal to all of the different components of the IDPA, because I've addressed sort of 6 of the major ones on these slides. But there's certainly more, and you don't want to have to go and search and hunt for them. So the Data Protection Central gives us a central place in which we can go and find anything that we need. And as promised earlier, I'm going to talk a little bit about how the IDPA can shrink your RPO and your RTO objectives. And a lot of that is predicated on the data domain deduplication engine and its proprietary protocol, DD Boost. As the amount of data that we need to back up grows, and the amount of servers that we need to back up grows, it takes longer and longer to do backups of our data in our systems, right? If it takes a full day to, as for the scenario I talked about earlier, if it takes a full day to do backups that you start at midnight, well, it's almost pointless because we can never meet our RPO objectives of being able to recover from when those backups started. And so this is where the DD Boost protocol comes into place. It provides something called source-side deduplication to speed up the backups. And what this means is that at the source level of where those backups are coming from, let's just say that's the server. The server with the DD Boost protocol will only send new data or new blocks of data to the data domain. So it doesn't have to send stuff to the data domain that it already has. And this strategy will provide for at least 2 times faster backups just from one single source. The IDPA also provides for 7 more what we call backup streams to increase the number of concurrent backups that it can perform. It's one thing to say we speed up the backups twice as fast, but cutting twice as fast from say a 12 hours to a backup to 6 hours still doesn't allow us to meet our RPO objectives. And so the amount of streams that we have, which is the amount of concurrent backups that we can do of different systems, can help us reduce that time even further. And the IDPA in general provides us about 7 times more backup streams so that we can do a lot more concurrent backups to the system, thereby reducing that RPO down to what we need. So that way we can, when we need to recover something, we can actually recover what we're looking for. Now, and as this slide shows, the effect of all of this DD Boost also has the effect of reducing the amount of bandwidth necessary to do our backups. And what this means is less network congestion, right? And if you send backups to the cloud or you send backups to another data center, what you're doing is you're helping to free up a lot of that bandwidth from your WAN connections or your internet connections. And again, getting data to the other place faster means that there's less chance that you're going to have a disaster in the middle of any of those backups or replications happening, right? And as for backing up, the restores of the data are very much the same. The speed, the simplicity, the efficiency, and the orchestration of all of these complex tasks to do the recoveries are much better with the IDPA, much better orchestrated. And what this means is that you can recover from a single file to an entire environment at a much shorter time period. And so you can reach your RTO objectives or exceed them. All right, I think I've talked quite a bit, and I think a little bit over my time of what Dorota gave me. But thank you very much for listening to me rant for the last 45 minutes. Yeah, back to you, Dorota.
Thank you. Sorry. Thank you, Cash, very much. That was actually very, very informative. So, very well put. Thank you very much. I do have a couple of questions. We are getting to 1 o'clock here, and I want to honor everybody's time. But maybe I'll just ask one questions, and we'll get to the other ones via email. The one question that I have is: are tape backups still a reliable system? I keep hearing no, but they have worked for us so far.
So tape backups are the great thing with tape backups is that they're relatively cheap, but they're slow. And what happens with a lot of tapes is that once you take the tape and you put it off into a vault somewhere, you never test it again. And so what happens with a lot of companies is that, after a year or two or even longer, and they realize that they need to recover some data, when they put that tape in, that tape no longer works. Or more likely scenario, what's happening these days is that because the technology changes so fast, the tape drive that you have can no longer read that tape that you had stored in that vault that you need to recover data from. I can certainly tell you about some horror stories that we've had with a client where we were asked to pull in just to do a project, and they had a fire, and they hadn't updated their systems for a very, very long time. And so when their servers also was flooded with water because the fire department sprayed all the water on the server room, well, they needed to recover all of their backups from tapes, and that tape drive that they were using hadn't been manufactured for probably at least a good 7 years, and there was no follow-up technology from that company that made it. And so what wound up happening is we were searching eBay to try to find this tape drive so that we can recover some of their data.
Okay, thank you. One more quick one. I know we're over time just a tiny bit, but I do want to get to this one. As you mentioned, many people assume that data stored on the cloud is secure as compared to an on-prem storage. Can you give an example of how data stored on the cloud can be compromised or lost? So basically the other spectrum, the other end of the spectrum from the tapes.
Well, so data stored in the cloud, again, it comes to how it is stored. So generally what happens is a lot of people take data and they copy it to the cloud. As an example, some SMBs that we talk to, they're like, well, I can use Google Drive or I can use OneDrive to simply copy my data there or to copy my backup there. And there's even some backup software that actually uses OneDrive or Google Drive as the backup target. Well, that information that you store there is just as vulnerable to hackers and to ransomware as the data that you keep on premise. And so if that data is easily accessible by you, it also means that it's easily accessible by the ransomware. So what we're finding is happening is the ransomware, again, they make a hit list of what they go after, right? And so they'll encrypt all of your cloud backups as well because it's easily accessible. So you need a system by which the data is going to be protected from easy access from the hackers and especially the ransomware.
Okay, thank you. I have a comment here. Is it for real? Some companies are still using tape drives. Yeah, no,
Yes.
we come across those quite a few times. It's actually quite interesting. Okay, I do want to honor the time. We're 3 minutes over. Any other questions that we haven't answered, we're going to email you directly. This recording will be available on our website, and we'll also be posting it. I think we'll be posting it on LinkedIn. We will now that I mentioned it. Any follow-ups, please email myself, Jeff, whom I know you've heard from with regards to the Skip the Dishes cards, or Cash. We will definitely get back to you. Thank you, everybody, very much for the attendance, and hope to see all of you in person when it's allowable again. Thanks very much.
Perfect. Thanks, everybody.